Hey artist friends, today I'm here with a tutorial using one of my new stencils and one of my old stencils. To begin, I grabbed a bunch of my palette sheets that kind of blended together, had kind of the same color family going on, and a couple of messy mark making sheets that I made, and I'm gonna stick them down in my journal pages with matte medium. I love using old book pages as my palette papers when I'm art journaling because I create the most amazing little marks and puddles of paint that in other cases I would never create. And so it's so much fun how these come out, and they make the perfect starting points for journal pages. And since that left side is a little smaller than my journal page and that right side doesn't have as much of the fun little puddles of paint on it, I'm going to tear apart some of the other sheets to just kind of fill in spaces. Really, I'm looking here to spread the color around to make sure that I have like the brown that I'm pretty sure is mostly walnut ink. Spread out different spaces on the pages, make sure that the blue kind of is like harmonious, so I have enough on the left and the right and so forth, and just filling in some of the larger white spaces to make this background look a little bit more cohesive and not so scattered. Though, you know, with all of those different paint marks, it is looking a little scattered, and we'll be solving that in a little bit. I absolutely love how this background is coming together, except for the fact that it's looking a little bit too yellow for me. So I'm going to solve that by adding some gesso to the page. I really love on that left side where the gesso is kind of like on top of the Payne's gray color. And so I'm going to want to try to emulate that on the right a little bit, but also add some more white, some darker moments of white, some more transparent moments of white. Mainly just really push back that vanilla yellow color that I don't want, and also not keeping it too thick in places because I still want to see the type behind it. I'm going to work at the same time with my hairdryer here for a couple reasons. First of all, it's on the cool setting so I don't burn my hand or warp my pages, but also it's going to help dry that gesso just a little bit faster. When I get it a little too over watery, I want to try to dry it faster so that it doesn't spread in places that I don't want, and it also helps me to layer up the gesso quicker. When I'm doing this process in my background, oftentimes I start with a really light hand of gesso, see how I like it, add it darker or thicker in some other spots. I'm using the gesso watered down at first and then some places at full strength, and just working kind of really thoughtfully as I do this, covering up that yellow background, calming some of the chaos, joining some of it, adding a little bit more white into my background. Alright, now it's time to add one of my new stencils with Titan Green Pale. I picked up the Titan Green Pale because I have it in the background already in the first layer, and I'm grabbing my foam applicator. I'm simply going to stencil it onto my page. This is one of my new stencils. It's the number stencil, and it is intentionally upside down and backwards because this is how the font was created by the designer, and I have all of that information about the font and about my inspiration in these stencils on my intro video, and also on the StencilGirl page. All of that will be linked below. So my intention with that gesso was to create some cohesion on my background and also push back that vanilla color. And now with the stencil, I'm adding a little bit more cohesiveness to the background as well. This is joining all of those blobs of color so that they kind of come together as one piece of paper, so to speak, in the background instead of a whole bunch of patchwork of colors. I'm simply adding the stencil in places that I feel like the blobs of color need to be either toned down or joined or something to make that come together a little bit more. One thing I love about my new stencils is that they can be flipped over, turned upside down, turned sideways, turned backwards, all different ways, and you have so many incredible fun looks with each stencil. And now I'm just adding a little bit of watered down Titan Green Pale to the background as well to kind of blend that stencil in a little bit and add a little bit more puddling of colors. Again, I'm just working on creating a cohesive background here. As I was working on this journal page and the layers, I realized I was missing some of that handwriting that I often have in my background. So I picked up a piece of ledger sheet that I had already used and there was a little bit left over, and I just ripped it apart, and I'm placing just several pieces of it around in my background. I'm hoping these are going to peek through in the perfect spots as I create my next layers moving forward. I just simply spread it around on the page in places that just needed a little bit more moments of interest. As I spread out this ledger page, I'm realizing that it's also starting to bother me because it is on top of everything. And as I create my layers, I like to always make sure that they blend together. So because this is just floating on top, I'm going to have to use something to solve that issue. So next I'm going to pick up my sepia India ink and just begin to spread it a little bit on the edges, a little bit here and there. Again, to bring a little bit more cohesiveness to the page and to disguise those ledger sheets a little bit so they don't look like they're floating so much on top. This is also going to add kind of like a darker element a little bit to my background pages, kind of start to deepen them and bring a little bit more shadow and shading to them. As I'm working on my layers, especially as I am kind of repeating mundane tasks like this one, I'm always thinking of where I need this page to go next. And I'm loving the darker element that this sepia ink is adding to my pages. So I'm wanting to add another darker element as well to kind of continue to build that interest into my background layer. I'm also thinking about where I'm going to go next after that and what my main topic, main subject, main focal point is going to be. And I'm kind of narrowing that down in my head as I'm working on it. So my next step is to grab my Payne's Gray Self Flat Paint and add a little bit more stenciling to my background. This is going to add another darker element to it that I'm wanting. I'm going to kind of concentrate in areas that I feel again need a little bit more interest. And as I work on this, I also realize that I really like the Payne's Gray stenciled on top of the Payne's Gray blobs that are already on the page. So I'm going to really kind of concentrate in those areas to add a little deeper color, and then just some other areas that I feel again need that little bit more interest to the background layer. I'm wanting to really add a lot here to my background because I'm going to do some reductive painting coming up. If you haven't seen the intro video yet, or any of my other videos, or any of my announcements, I have 3 new stencils with StencilGirl. They're all typography stencils. The links to all 3 will be below in the description box, and also the links to all the videos will be there as well. Now that I feel my background is pretty much there, I'm grabbing one of my first stencil releases from StencilGirl, Wonky Leaves, to start creating some focal point images. I'm using the mask of the stencil as how I'm going to do the reductive painting, but I used the main part of the stencil to kind of pick out the perfect spot on my page, put that down first, put the mask inside, and then removed the stencil so I'd have the exact spot that I wanted all of that really cool background to show through. Now I'm just using that same sponge applicator lightly around the edges. I'm holding this mask down really well because it's a little detailed, and I'm kind of using as gentle of a stroke or a pounce or circular movement as I can here with that applicator, but my fingers are getting a little messy because I'm holding down the stencil in so many places. As I was working on it, I was kind of thinking it's like finger twister. If you've ever played that twister game, I have to keep rotating my fingers around that mask to make sure that I hold it down in all the places as I'm stenciling. And before that Payne's Gray is completely dry, I'm going to soften the edges with some watered down Payne's Gray. I'm going to use some full strength Payne's Gray where I need it to make this look like it's not just like stenciled on the page, but a little bit more purposeful. Once I have that finished, I grabbed that mask again to add a little bit of a leaf shape to that right side. And I'm just continuing that same process, defining the edges, smoothing out the paint, feathering it out a little bit, making sure that it just looks good on the page. I don't know exactly where I'm going to go from here. I know I'm going to do some more masking and some more painting, but I thought it would look really cool to kind of drip that Payne's Gray down onto the next page to kind of look like whatever I do over there joins with this right side. So I'm adding some really, really watered down Payne's Gray paint. I'm adding it to the edge of all of that painting and feathering out that I've been doing, holding my book, spraying it, and allowing it to drip. So now I'm adding another leaf shape to that bottom left, and if you'll notice, I flipped that mask over, so even though it's the exact same mask, it's going to look a little bit differently because the mask is flipped over, so it'll look not like it's the same leaf repeated. One way to not make your stenciling look the same all the time is to do this, to eliminate a leaf, add a leaf, flip it over. That leaf shape on the very right, I didn't use as many leaves. These two are flipped over, so they don't look so repetitive on my pages. And I'm just continuing that same process, defining the edges, adding some Payne's Gray here and there, allowing these leaves to look like they belong on the page, that it's like softened enough that it doesn't look like there's some hard lines. And thinking about where to take this next. I'm thinking, do I want to put a big quote? Do I want to use an old photo? Where do I want to take it? And then I decided I wanted to use the other leaves that were on that stencil. So instead of using the mask this time, I'm going to actually use the stencil itself with some of the Titan Green Pale paint and add two of the 3 leaf shapes that kind of look like wonky clovers to this left side of the page. Because the stem wasn't long enough, I had to use my stencil to extend the stem down a ways, and now I'm going to just kind of soften some of that Titan Green Pale a little bit before it dries with some watered down Titan Green Pale, so it looks maybe a little bit more watercolory on the page, not so stenciled, and therefore kind of blends in a little bit more with that background layer, or I guess not the background, the last layer with that Payne's Gray around those other leaves that I created. I also realized that flipping that stencil over was a bad idea because I have a lot of stencil runoff there on the page. I'm using a baby wipe to quick get that off before it dries. I don't often clean my stencils, but because I'm using this one flipped over with that Titan green pail, I'm cleaning it really well with a baby wipe before I use that stencil flipped over to add my second leaf to the page. Continuing the same process here again, using the applicator to fill in the stencil spaces, then kind of adding a little bit of the watered down Titan green pail to those leaf shapes to make them look a little bit more watercolory and more a little grungy, not so stenciled. And I'm going to work on that original leaf a little bit as well to kind of clean it up a bit. Absolutely love how this page came together. I love my new number stencil in the background. I love my Wonky Leaves used both ways in the foreground using the mask and the stencil. However, both stencil leaves kind of just look like they're there on the page and not really anchored to the page. And so to solve that, I'm using my Stabilo All here in graphite to kind of outline the edges a little bit to make them look a little bit more like they were put on there, not just stenciled on there. I don't know how to explain it, but hopefully as you're watching this, you can see how it's just really more anchoring these shapes down and making them look a little bit more like intentional. I also grabbed this Stabilo All in black and put a little bit of that in the Payne's Gray leaves that were masked to add a little bit of shading inside of those leaves. Again, so they don't look so flat and they look like they're just more part of the page. Activating all that Stabilo is creating shadows, making these not look so flat onto the page, and is the exact final step that this page needed. So if you haven't seen my first stencil release or my new second stencil release, all of those links will be below in the description box. Thank you so much for watching this page come together. I hope it inspires you to grab some stencils and masks and some of your clean-off sheets or whatever you have around to create a fun, reductive painting spread and a masked and stenciled spread. Really, this was so much fun to put together. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for checking out my stencils. All of the supplies will also be listed in the description box below. I hope you have a wonderful day and happy stenciling!